Hi, everybody, and welcome. Before we get started, we're just going to wait a few minutes. So while everyone's filtering in, why doesn't everyone tell us a little bit about themselves, like who they are, where they're coming from in the chat? Oh, all right. Hi, everybody. Yeah, before we get started, if everyone wants to write about where they're coming from in the chat, so we can get to know you guys a little bit better before the presentation starts. Perfect. Whitehorse, wow. Burlington, Texas, wow, we're getting from everywhere. Wow.
Here they come. Wow.
Oh, yeah, there we go. Wow.
Someone from London. Wait, who's that? Yeah.
Everyone's, wow, this is amazing. All over North America. Well, welcome everybody. Okay, so it looks like we got a good room here already. So let's get started. First of all, thank you so much for taking time of your busy schedules to be here today. I'm Stephanie, Keel's marketing specialist. We also have Chelsea, our digital designer, helping us out on the tech side of things. So you might see her in the chat box or answering some of your technical questions. So feel free to say hello to Chelsea there. Before we get started, I wanted to start today's session by acknowledging that Keel's head office is located in Vancouver, which is on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Coast Salish people, the Musqueam, Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh First Nations, and give thanks for the generosity and hospitality on these lands and waters. If you're new to Keel, welcome. Keel is a fundraiser CRM, meaning it's designed with the unique needs of fundraisers in mind, aims to unify fundraising, communications, and donor management into one single source of truth. Should you have any questions during the presentation that you'd like Tracey to answer, please enter them in the chat box or in the Q&A section below, and we'll get to as many as we can by the end. Speaking of the chat box, please remember to select everyone when you type so our guests today can read your comments. And finally, this webinar is being recorded and you'll receive access to the recording before the end of the week. Before we hand it off to Tracey, I'd like to welcome Stephen, who is going to say a few words about Imagine Canada's Grant Connect.
Thanks, Stephanie. Yeah, I'll wait for you to put up that slide. Oh, amazing.
There you go.
Okay, thank you. Hey, everyone. Thanks for joining today. I'm Stephen Baldwin. As you can see here, I'm Imagine Canada's Interim Director of Digital Product. I've worked on our fundraising research platform, Grant Connect, for more than 5 years, and that's kind of how I got introduced to prospect research. I also lead digital strategy for HR Intervals, which is a comprehensive knowledge base of sector-related HR resources. And I pretty much kind of stick my nose into anything data and tech related at Imagine. I'm excited to introduce this session because of the topic and of course the presenter. Along with being kind of a master of prospect research, Tracey has been such a crucial supporter of Grant Connect over the years, and also one of its toughest critics when we weren't kind of meeting our potential. And she has both directly and indirectly kind of pushed us to improve our platform so it meets the needs of researchers and fundraisers like you in this constantly evolving funding landscape. And even in the 5 years I've been at Imagine, it's just things are just changing so quickly, and every year there's something new. So if you're not familiar with Grant Connect, there's some info here, but we provide in-depth data on thousands of institutional funders, including corporations, foundations, government programs, donor advised funds. Our goal as a team and kind of why we come into work is to help fundraisers and prospect researchers get to the heart of what funders are looking for. And being part of Imagine Canada, we also have this kind of unique access to the latest fundraising trends and data, and more importantly, kind of constant exposure to all kinds of folks like you across the sector, as well as funders. And one of our goals as an organization is to make funding for charities and nonprofits more accessible, flexible, and equitable. So you can learn more about Grant Connect at imaginecanada.ca/Grant Connect. You can also just Google Grant Connect; it will come up eventually. And please feel free to reach out to me with any questions or ideas for how we can improve the platform. I know there's hundreds of you on here, but I still kind of welcome that feedback. So yeah, thank you again for spending this time with us, and I hope you enjoy the session and learn a lot. And I'll hand it back over to Stephanie to introduce Tracey.
Thank you, Stephen. Let me just pull up my notes here. Sorry, 1 second. Here we go. So now I'm very excited to welcome Tracey Church, Principal Researcher and Consultant at Tracey Church and Associates. Tracey has been a professional researcher for over 20 years and has worked with over 400 organizations helping with prospect identification, strategic planning, database management, and so much more. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to you, Tracey.
Thank you so much. And Stephen, don't feel so bad. I'm really hard on all the vendors. No, I'm just kidding. So I will share my screen now as well. Welcome everybody. And yeah, I do welcome those folks from the Squamish Nation, where my son is actually now living in a van as a climber. So it was kind of great to see one of the Squamish Nation go by there, and you mentioned that in your land acknowledgement. So thank you for that. Let me just let's from my beginning there. I'm hoping everybody can see that okay. So yes, welcome. And this is kind of a follow-up session from a session that was done last May through Imagine and Keela as well. And this is kind of the next steps to prospect research. I was mentioning to Alex and Stephanie and Stephen that I normally do this in a 13-week course. So I'll do what I can in 45 minutes. And I do hope that if anyone has any questions, feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to answer them. Okay, I'm just going to Okay, so I do have an late acknowledgement. I'm actually in London, Ontario. So we acknowledge that we are located on the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, the Awawak, and the Attawandaron peoples, on lands connected with the London Township and Sombra treaties of the 1796 and the Dish with One Spoon Covenant Wampum. This land continues to be home to diverse Indigenous peoples, First Nations, Métis, and Inuit, whom we recognize as contemporary stewards of the land and vital contributors to our society.
Tracey, I hate to interrupt you. We're not seeing your slides.
You're not seeing.
We're not seeing the full screen.
You're not seeing the full screen. What are you seeing?
We're still seeing the title slide, and it hadn't moved on to your second slide there.
Okay, so hang on a second. I'll try that again. Can you see that? What do you see?
Yep, all good.
Recap?
Yep, we're good.
Recap. Okay, it just didn't click over. Okay, thanks so much for telling me that. So last May, Celine, who's a friend of mine and a colleague, she had a previous webinar. So if you want that one, just contact Imagine or Keela, and they'll be able to send you a link for that. But she did talk about what is prospect research, research ethics, and APRA. APRA is our professional association as far as researchers go, and how researchers are strategic partners. We work within the fundraising cycle. I'm going to touch on that a little bit. She talked about a prospect review template, which would be kind of like a mini profile, I guess you could say. Some of the ratings she talked about that we always kind of introduce so that we can prioritize prospects, and some free and fee online sources. So I'm going to talk about some of that, just touch on it, but then expand. So today's agenda, a little thoughts on pre-research. I always say before you open the directories or open Imagine Canada or iWave or Charity Can or whatever you're using, there's some things you kind of need to think about of what you are looking for in your prospects, and also not to silo yourself. So no silos here. I always say, remember, the people that we're looking at, they don't know all of these words like major giving prospects or planned giving prospects or annual. They don't know that sort of stuff. So I don't want you to silo yourself either. We're going to do some prospect identification, and then a little bit about researching foundations, corporations, and individuals. Look at some wealth indicators and how you calculate wealth ratings. What's integrated giving, which is very important nowadays. And I've slipped in a couple case studies as well. Again, and I'm going to watch my time because I do go long. So I have asked Stephanie to give me a 10-minute heads up so that we can have some questions and answers at the end. We are having a draw today. So the Prospect Research in Canada book is an APRA Canada initiative. And essentially, the processes around the world are all the same, right? But the resources in Canada are different. We have stricter privacy laws here than they have in some of the other countries out there. So we felt the need to bring together, for some reason, 30 researchers, not all Canadian, some American, sort of put this book together. So we are giving away one of those to the attendees today. Stephanie, after this is done, will go through the attendee list and she'll pull someone's name and I will mail it to them. And then here's a link as well. I will also send Keela and Imagine Canada a PDF of this entire presentation with the hot links. So don't bother scribbling too much. But anyway, looks like someone raised a hand, but we are going to save the questions and answers to the end, unless it's something that maybe Stephanie, maybe he can't see the presentations. So we're going to think outside the box a little bit, or the pyramid. So you've probably seen this traditional prospect research, fundraising pyramid. And for the longest time, prospect research kind of lived in this zone. Like, so those organizations that were lucky enough to get a prospect researcher all to themselves kind of focused on the major giving area here. But it's grown now that we're working in all realms. So traditionally, researchers were hired to find individuals and corporations and foundations who are most likely to give major gifts to their organizations for a campaign or a particular program or case. But now researchers are strategic partners with the fundraising team to find the best fit, both in levels and programming and timing for their prospective donors for their organization. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But why do we obsess about major giving and campaigns? It's the cost to raise a dollar, right? So for me, when COVID came along and a lot of events were canceled, I have to admit, I had this big sigh of relief. I'm not a big event fan because the people who are dependent on events, as you know, it costs a lot of money to do an event. And quite often there's not a lot of cost on return there. So the whole major gift piece is, you know, if you bring in $100,000 gift or a $1 million gift, even if it takes you 18 months, boy, that takes a lot off of the bottom line. So when we talk about prospects, and I know that in some areas, sort of like a pre-prospect is called suspects. We don't actually call them really suspects here in Canada. It just sounds really shady. It's a suspect, but anyway. But prospects, just remember, are, you know, basically potential donors, right? So you want to make sure that your pipeline, your prospect pipeline, has a good mixture of prospect types. So you want to make sure there's foundations in there and corporations and individuals, and that's not too, sorry, turn that off. It's my son in Squamish, so his ears must have been burning. Anyway, often the difference of the foundations, corporation, individuals are the difference in how an individual gives. So when I think of someone like Gerald Schwartz from Onyx, for instance, he and his wife, Heather Reisman, who's the head of Indigo Books, they give as a couple, as they give as family. They have a family foundation. They each give through their corporations, and so on. So they give all through all of their different vehicles. So sometimes you have to decide how you want to approach somebody. Prospects at various capacity levels. I don't know how many of you use gift charts. I do. I'm a big advocate of gift charts because quite often it's a reality check. Here's your goal. How do we get there? How many gifts per level do we really need to get? Prospects at different stages of the fundraising cycle. So we want someone identified, someone qualified, some in cultivation, some in solicitation. And in the stewardship, the prospect researcher keeps track of, hey, when can these folks come back around again for another gift? And regardless of whether or not your prospect is a foundation, corporation, individual, it still comes down to individuals. So in London here, we're the headquarters of 3M Canada. You can't say, "Dear Ms. 3M Canada, we would love a gift." You still need to find out who are the contacts, who makes the decisions, are there any linkages? So it's still all about individuals. So never ever pass on a prospect that's a foundation or a corporation without the contact people. And that's quite often where a lot of the digging comes in. Some pre-research thinking here. So traditionally, quite often, sort of the prospects would skew to this older kind of generation, very kind of like European descent and everything. But you know what? New Canadians tend to donate larger amounts than Canadians born in Canada. So make sure that you are diversifying your prospect base. Make sure it's reflective of your constituent area, reflective of the organization you work for and the programs that you give. So make sure that the multicultural newcomer residents are included in this. And there's different approaches, right, to different cultural groups. So you have to be very respectful that way. But make sure that you don't go to the same old, is kind of what I'm saying. And generational giving, you've seen this. What the reason I put this up here is that regardless of generation, and each generation gives, people give to more than one organization. So don't dismay if you're starting to do research on somebody and you see that they gave $100,000 gift to someone else. I celebrate because I think, wow, okay, I knew that person had capacity. Look, now they're giving. And guess what? They've already had a major gift conversation with somebody. They know what it looks like. And everybody gives to more than one organization. So think of your own giving. And you're like, yeah, I do give to more than one organization. Even if, you're in your 20s, you probably are giving to somebody. So prospecting, and we're going to get into prospect ID kind of on the second part there. I always say look inward first. So see who you have within your organization first before you go outside and start looking at all the different resources we have. So this could be lapsed major giving donors, mid-level donors that might be able to be upgraded, annual giving donors that might be upgraded. There are some good screening services out there that might help you prioritize a bit. I always recommend after a screen of some sort or analytics of some sort, you do vet and do little deeper dives, because I live in a university town and it's amazing how many sort of like big houses are actually overtaken by students, right? So those students that have that address doesn't mean that that's their house. So you have to be careful with the analytics piece. Can you start up a scoring system? I like to sort of start basic. And then can you do a little data mining light? So based on the business term RFM, which just means recent gifts plus frequent gifts plus monetary gifts. And you can start to sort of score yourself. And then you can go out. Once you kind of qualified who you currently have and where they all lay out in the gift table, then you can start to identify new potential donors. And that's where like Grant Connect comes in and everything. And not because this is a Grant Connect Imagine Canada webinar, but I have used them from day one, right? So, Stephen, I definitely predate all of the Imagine Canada people on this call, sort of thing. So yes, I will sort of call them to task. It's like, hey, you used to do this. Why don't you do this anymore? That sort of thing. Anyway, so you can start to identify new donors. They could be identified through network of your executives or volunteers, committee members. Again, you're kind of starting in and working outwards. They might have an affinity to your cause, or they could be grateful patients. I think in the US, you have a lot more access to that. We don't have access to patients here in Canada. We have a PIPEDA, which is a Privacy Act. Those who support other like causes, we do look at other donor lists, or those who have identified certain areas of support through their foundation or corporation. Okay, so let's look at sort of, these are just kind of high level. We're going to dig into these a little bit. We're going to do a case study on, say, how I found a particular foundation for a particular prospect ID project I was doing. So for foundations, and I always start with foundations too, because hey, let's face it, a lot of these private family foundations were set up to give away money. And you're thinking that is awesome, right? So that's why we kind of start with foundations. They're kind of the easiest first step in the door, that so to speak. So Imagine Canada Grant Connect, you can search by funding interest and geography, and you can search by capital or operating, all sorts of different sort of things you can search by, which is really makes it helpful. For me, it's mostly funding interest because almost all the other tools are broad, because what they've done is they've basically brought in the information from the CRA, from Canadian Revenue Agency, and those kind of categories are super broad. And if I put in, say, something like whatever, Christian organization, London or something, I would get mine back. Well, I don't want that. I want the ones that are funding. I don't want the ones that are asking sort of thing. In iWave, they have the CRA downloads. They also have a lot of US information. So the US folks on the call, I bet you probably have iWave or at least familiar with it. iWave is one of the ones that I also subscribe to because of the US information. Let's face it, I mean, a lot of the high net worth individuals in Canada also have a lot of investments in the US, including property, right? So that's why sort of iWave, I use that because also we have a lot of subsidiary corporations here in Canada that the headquarters might be in the US or another country. So that's the type of thing that I'll use for. Charity Can is, yeah, it's very Canadian focused, but it has a lot of resources that aren't available in the other ones. And if you put your own organization as a default, whatever Tracey Church or whatever sort of thing, it will suggest prospects to you. It's like, hey, you should check out this foundation because whatever, certain reasons. So that's kind of interesting. Now, some people don't have any money to do anything, right? Sort of thing. So the CRA and in the US, Candid, they have gifts to other organizations and stuff. And you can access the T4010s in Canada and the 990s in the US to get foundation information. Only 25% of funding foundations have websites. So we need some of these other resources to go after them. For corporations, again, so Imagine Canada Grant Connect, they do have corporations in there. They also have some government funding stuff. They do have some US foundations because I also look at US foundations. There's a lot of areas like the environment, the arts, that sort of thing that do cross borders when they fund. In corporations, iWave has Dun Bradstreet. They have Zoom Info. I look at corporations in the area that have largest revenue. I look to see who they are, who are the executives, and so on. In Charity Can, they also have prospect suggestions, similar. And then if you have no subscriptions, guess what? Go to your library. I used to be a librarian back in the day, and there are so many great free resources in the library. So look again for those business resources that you can go. Look at your vendors. A lot of vendors give you stuff for maybe wholesale. Have they ever been thanked? Do they also give philanthropic gifts and so on? Individuals, of course, it all comes down to individuals, because even if you're looking at somebody's foundation, you still want to know, who are they? How did they get their money? Do we have any linkages to them? So it's not just basically sort of filling in the online form. Again, you can kind of look at families and directors if you're in Grant Connect or iWave or Charity Can. There's also relationship science, and that's part of the kind of the WealthX and Wealth Engine group down in the US. Very expensive, but it's interesting that both iWave and Charity Can, they have connections through and linkage type relationship maps through nonprofit boards, but relationship science has connections through, say, companies, right? So that's the type of thing we want to look at as well. Again, take a look at your library for sort of executives and linkages and so on. Business magazines are great if you're building up the of the pipeline too. Like the folks that are in BC there, I think it's business in Vancouver and everything. Wow, the lists are so awesome, and this is just wonderful. One of the things to remember, if you are looking at someone's gifts, first gifts or something, and you're trying to maybe put together a capacity rating based on somebody's giving, if they've only given one gift to your organization or one gift to another organization, that's not their capacity. That's their test gift. So I don't know if you guys have read Penelope Burke's Donor-Centered Fundraising. I do very much advocate that you do read it if you haven't. Basically, she's saying that around 50% of the gifts, a modest gift is intentionally given to see how they do, how they stewarded properly. Are they going to give again? So they have these tester gifts. So undergiving is real. So be careful when you're basing capacity just on someone else's giving or giving to organization. What you want to do is look at an individual historical giving and trends. So I find one of the biggest trends is you'll find that donors give their largest gifts when they're actually involved with the organization. And you think, well, that's obvious, Tracy, but not really. Maybe your first solicitation step is to get them on a committee or a board first, and then get in that big, big gift, right? So look at University of Toronto's Boundless campaign. They had like the juiciest capital campaign board, and all of those folks gave their largest gifts while they were participating in that campaign. So just think about the trends and look at when people give and when they volunteer, and is there a match there? So linkages too. I mean, it's becoming more and more important that you make sure that you kind of do peer screening, and that's when you kind of basically talk with your board members as to who they know, who they're willing to open up doors to. They may not want to ask, but that's okay. We want to just see who they know. But there's a ton of linkages. These are your key stakeholders. So get to know these people and find out who they know. Tons of linkage information out there now. So Charity you can put in your organization and then who you're looking at, and they'll have these little links as to, you could, these little, this is a print screen, but arrow would say, hey, they sat on this board together during these years. In iWave, if you set up a profile on somebody, you see the connections piece here, they talk about all the different people on the boards that they have overlaps. This is relationship science, and you can see it's basically business relationships. And then you're thinking, I just have the basic LinkedIn. I know some higher education organizations can afford the high-end LinkedIn, but you can sort of see even yourself, if you have put a corporation that you're looking at in LinkedIn, oh, do I have some first, second, and third degree connections with this? And turns out you might, right? Back in the day in Imagine Canada Grant Connect, you should actually, if you had your LinkedIn open, they would, and you were looking at a corporation, it would say, hey, you're linked in by this sort of network. But then I think LinkedIn said, no, you can't do that anymore. I'm sure you guys can confirm that for me. Here's some my favorite resources for foundations. There's more out there. There's some fee-based ones and some free-based ones, as I've mentioned, and I'm going to look a little bit at some of these. Again, I do look at the US GuideStar and Foundation Center. The 990s are essentially PDFs on the free version, but it still gives you all the information, right? What's really interesting too is when we get into sort of corporations is quite often our Canadian executives, if they're on an American board, either a nonprofit or a profit board, you get their home address on the American board, but you don't on a Canadian board. It's kind of interesting. So, and again, we don't necessarily use the home address because we're going to solicit from the home address, but it helps with the real estate piece. Public or university libraries, if you have any affiliation, make sure you use them. So this is just a print screen from Imagine Canada Grant Connect. We're going to go into this kind of case study in a little bit. But again, you can kind of pick out different funders. As I said, this is a print screen, but you can go down to special populations if you want. In the little sort of hamburger stack over here, You can get into some of the beta versions of if you wanted to try to put in a keyword somewhere, as well, in the directors as are well there too. They do have you can kind of add to the pipeline if you don't have a database yourself where you might have all the different solicitation stage. You can create one in Grant Connect. I don't, because I work for multiple organizations and we just get to be a big mess. But make sure you do save your searches as you go so that you can sort of say, oh, what was I doing last week? Anyway, you can go back. And Candide, this is the free one. So if you get an idea of kind of which you can go by geography or sort of not so much by program, you do have to pay, and maybe some of the US folks can pipe in later on this. You do have to pay if you want to get a little deeper. This is the paid version of Foundation Directory. But again, it does have subject areas, population served, and it has some Canadian ones in here too. So, I mean, it's worthwhile kind of getting some sort of subscription to if you're getting into foundation research. Corporate, this is all my great, sort of all my favorite ones. And you'll notice here as well that I have Canadian resources. These are CEDAR and SETI, that's for public company records. Edgar's the US version of that. And remember, I was saying, if someone has investments in Canada, there's a pretty good chance they have investments in the US too. And then I always look at city directories. You can Google your head off and you won't get into the city directory. So you do have to go to, this is just the City of London, London Economic Development Commission. The reason why I like to look at the London Economic Development Commission is all of the new businesses that come into London have to register with them. So they have information in the directories I might not be able to get anywhere else. I always say have one really good business directory, whether it's through, the iWave or Charity Can or whatever, or the library. Make sure you get something in there. Imagine Canada also has caring companies, so which is kind of nice. There's about 120, and they basically agree to give away 1% of their pre-tax profits to their communities. So if you're starting a prospect list and you're thinking, wow, how do I start adding businesses? Well, take a look. 120 is not too hard to vet. And I'm kind of hoping they'll expand it. I'm glad there's some Imagine Canada people on the call here, because it's a great sort of, it's a great resource to kind of get started. And also conversation piece. If someone has this trust mark on their website, they're proud of being a caring company, and that could actually be a conversation starter. Libraries. Okay, did I say that before already? I'll say it again. Look at Toronto Public Library, all of the wonderful, yummy online business resources they have. It's great. So go and get a Toronto Public Library card. If you live in Toronto, I mean, I don't. I have a London Public Library card. But anyway, we won't get into that because poor London Public Library is having a problem with some ransomware right now. So we'll move on. Individuals, lots of good stuff out there on individuals, but you want to get into getting into sort of gifts to other organizations. We talk about that. We look at shareholdings because we're trying to kind of build somebody's wealth. We look at real estate. We have limited access to OBIT databases in Canada, but you have some really good ones in the States. They have some they have some expensive kind of resources out there. Those folks in the US or anywhere, Helen Brown Group, they have a lot of good resources on their website. We have in Canada, we look at farmland properties, which is really hard to assess sometimes, recreational property. We look at demographics, what the neighborhood's like, and so on. Top 100s I like to see who we have, who we might need, who's in the area. There's some home assessments out there in provinces other than Ontario, you lucky guys, we have to pay for ours. But there's a whole pile of real estate of websites, obviously, we can use. For information on individuals, well, we collect a lot of stuff because this is important stuff. We do collect also even their social media, their public social media. We do everything publicly, of course. And if you had read or looked at ABRA's ethics after Celine's presentation, you'd know that we look at only public realms and we only research as ourselves. Everything goes into the database. Now, I know when I was talking to Keela, they said that they have some databases or sort of like attributes you could set up if you don't have some of these actual fields in the database. But you want to make sure everything's in there, and don't ever do research without a capacity rating, right? Because guess what? If you hand it over to your development officer and there's not a capacity rating attached, the next question is like, hey, well, how much can they give us? So that's something that you have to make sure that we get into. I'm going to touch on that too. This is just a print screen from the free CDAR public company information we can get in Canada. And basically, this is the executive compensation table, and we get these in Edgar as well in the States. What's really interesting is even though it's a public company, there's still limitations, right? So you see there's 5 listed here. Well, that's the 5 financial decision makers in the company. Onyx this is from Onyx, by the way. Onyx has like 60,000 employees. So I kind of want to know who everybody else is, or at least the top 100. So even though you're researching public companies in the realm, you're still going to find gaps. So don't kill yourself or knock yourself out if you're thinking, wow, I know that this guy has shares somewhere, but I can't find them. There's still limits. And same with shareholdings. The Canada shareholdings, SEC is based on the US one. So shareholdings are only listed if they're executive of a company or a director of a company, or they have over 10% shares. So I always say, if I ever win Lotto 649, a Lotto Max or whatever, I will have a 9% share in many companies and people still won't know. So I'm just waiting for those days. We have lots of good resources. This is from Charity Can, but you can also subscribe to Canadian Who's Who. There's US Who's Who, there's Business Who's Who's. And what I like about the Who's Who's, which is not only fun to say, but it's great, is look, here is most of your basic profile information, I guess, or at least contact information. And you can be sure that historically it's pretty good. You just have to figure out if the most current listing on, first of all, looking when it was last updated, if the current position is still current. I think of things like Alberta or Texas or anybody that's oil related. They bop around companies and open up companies right, left, and center worldwide all the time. So if you do some research on somebody who's in the oil patch here in January, and you don't have development officers that can maybe reach out to them by March, that might be stale research. So you have to be careful of that sort of thing, right? So, but anyway, you can talk about, this is like historical Who's Who stuff, which is great. And of course, the Who's Who wasn't made for prospect researchers. We just love it. But anyway, so if you can't get somebody's actual property address, and quite often, say in Ontario, Muskokas are big around here, but this goes all across Canada. Sometimes you'll come across this like, oh, Tracey and Will Church have a vacation property on, Lake Joseph or something. And it's like, okay, well, that's not very specific and I can't seem to find them. You can at least kind of get estimates. So demographics. So this is from my postal code. And guess what? I'm a savvy senior. So this is it's a wake-up call. Maybe it's time I hung up my golf clubs or whatever. But what's kind of nice is you can go to Prism Environics. There's a link here. Put in a postal code, and it gives you these segments, like what is the household? So, and it's started based on the demographics they use for campaigns and everything in the States. Like if you shop at Whole Foods and you drive a Volvo, and I think last week someone actually drove a Volvo into Whole Foods. But anyway, you'll probably vote a Democrat. You'll probably be a Democrat. Do you know what I mean? So they have these kind of sectors and segments that these people that live in this postal code are likely to be this educated, make this average amount of money, shop in these stores, and that sort of idea. So it's really good to know that. Now, of course, I think Environics will honestly, yeah, so I see a little oh face, but it's true. So put your postal code in here and have a little giggle anyway. People resources. So it's very important that you do have your organization has active social media presence, because everybody influences their own peers, right? So, and I do look at people's social media public presence as well. For small businesses, you know, oh, I've got Twitter here. I guess I should put formally Twitter X or something. But anyway, I do follow them as well on their LinkedIn. Quite often things appear on social media before they appear on their website, right? And there's many more sort of resources out there. I put mine into a RSS feed. Mine's feedly.com. It costs me $11 a month. So if I'm doing like a track or a news alert or something, I put it into Feedly so that I'll go in there once or twice a month rather than it coming into my email and just overloading. Let's talk a little bit about wealth in the next couple of minutes anyway. So yeah, so we do want to ask the right amount. So we look at donation history, wealth lists and articles and information circulars and real estate and so on. And we want to sort of estimate someone's total net worth. In the States, I've seen actually spreadsheets where they include artwork and all sorts of stuff. We don't have access to that sort of thing in Canada, but we do have this other, right? But you get an idea that based on someone's income, and this is for high net worth individuals or stock or other, you can actually extrapolate what their net worth is. And then on average, individuals give between 1% and 5% of their net worth to everyone over 5 years. So that's called total philanthropic capacity. And that's baked into a lot of analytics and screens that are out there as well. A lot of it depends on age too and how close they are. Corporations on average give about 1% of their revenue. So we're looking for that. And foundations in Canada, the quota, what's it called? Donation quota. Anyway, disbursement quota just went up to 3.5% to 5% just last year. And so we can figure out what someone's able to give to any organization, right? But keep in mind, if you look at some of these, they're not going to give it all to you. So don't get all, excited about that. Foundations, if they're family foundations, might not have to give every year. And they're not, they don't raise money for particular programs necessarily, like events. They don't do events and things like that, the private foundations. So they don't necessarily have to give it away. And they do play the markets. So if the markets are doing well, then they might give more, right? So anyway, so Stephanie raised the hand. I'll get back to you, Stephanie. And then you kind of look at affinity is how likely someone is to give to your organization based on how connected they feel with your cause. Linkage might be in there too. Capacity is, what they're likely to give to anybody. But then you just kind of tone it a bit with the affinity. So you kind of just set up these ratings in your database and you can get started today. And but this time next year, you're going to have all these great ratings and you can set up this little capacity versus affinity. So, hey, the high capacity, high affinity folks, they are your major giving prospects, right? But high capacity, low affinity, we don't know what their affinity is. Those are the ones that need cultivation. This is where the development officers live. They invite them for tours, they contact them, they send them information. The low capacity, high affinity, so that means people who have been giving to you a long time, but might not have a capacity to give a major gift. Those are your good planned giving prospects, your frequent faithful, so they say. And then this one here, if someone doesn't have good capacity or affinity, for God's sakes, let them go. Don't spend any more resources on them. One of my friends that I worked with at CNIB, she said, yes, we're going to bless and release these ones. Yeah, that's a lot of money. You know, quite often it's the researcher that says, nope, that's not where you're getting paid for. Let's move on. Let's move on. And then this is my happy zone. The people who are willing to give to like major giving and planned giving. We're going to talk about that. So that's integrated giving. So quite often it's the researcher that says, hey, this person is asset heavy. Most of their wealth is in real estate or stock or something like that. So maybe we should be thinking a planned gift. In other words, they're not going to sell their house to give you a gift, right? So, but they might leave you a planned gift, right? So quite often, I don't think of the pyramid anymore. I think of these mixtures. And all donors have a home somewhere. And if they don't, say bye-bye, you know, they can give somewhere else. This is just a print screen from iWave. You can actually look up if someone's already said they're going to give a bequest to an organization, which is cool because you see, here's our friend Jerry Schwartz, and he's already said he's going to give a bequest to a couple of organizations already. He's still alive and kicking and giving, as you know, $100 million gifts. But pay attention if your prospect donor already has given a planned gift to someone else or said they would, because you might be able to recommend an integrated ask if they have. And similar to the major gift discussion, they've already had that planned gift discussion. They know what it sounds like. They're not scared of talking about their will, for instance. This is an actual case that I worked on, and I know we're coming up to time, but I'll get going. I was working for a social services charity where we noticed that there was this gala couple that they kept giving $1,000 a year to the gala. And we thought, you know what? They have more potential for major and planned gift. When we approached the director of development, he didn't really want to approach him because he said, oh, that might jeopardize the revenue of the gala. We're like, what? Anyway, so they said, well, look, talk to them. And when he talked to the donors, they said, oh yeah, they wanted to name the building. And guess what? The building was already built. It wasn't even just being built. So they thought, oh, okay, that's awesome. They figured out how much that would cost. And they figured out their own blended gift. So half of the amount they said would be a major gift outright. A quarter would be left in their will. And the other quarter, they wanted to host parties at their house, which each would bring an X amount a year. And if they didn't, they would top it up. In the US, they call that kind of salons, and it's these private parties. So they made their own package and they still support the gala. And of course, they're not siloed. They're not in any particular little pocket, right? There's other ratings out there. One of the universities I worked with had 15 different ratings, but they also had about 15 researchers. So you have to be careful that you don't overtax yourself. Okay, this is just a little walkthrough. It'll only take a couple minutes. So a case study, let's walk through it. So an organization is Small Toronto Theatre. They're looking for foundations, corporations, and or individuals willing to make a gift of $25,000 or above. And I know some of the ones, the US folks on the call are going like, 25,000, but you know, it is a major gift to some people. They can't be on the current prospect donor list, so you have to kind of vet it against that. Affinity would be something like theater, performing arts, and or arts and culture. Linkages to their directors or their major giving donors already would be an asset. And they need contact information, capacity, and research. So, okay, let's go back to Grant Connect. So, Theatre, Ontario, I'm looking for foundations to start in Toronto. And so there has, what is it here? 12 results, right? So, okay, all right, let's take a look at one of these. Let's take a look at North Pine. I already know Metcalf's on their list. So let's take a look at North Pine. So here we go with North Pine. So it was last updated. Always look at the last update list. So that's 2022. So I'm thinking, okay, I have to check on some stuff here, but it's like theater. Okay, great. Social services, children and youth. My theater also has a children and youth program. So that's cool. I could have added that in there. So things that I have to check on. Looks good, but it needs to confirm. I need to confirm the address, right? I need to confirm who are the major officers, and if they're alive, don't forget, some people pass on, so don't ever just depend on one source. And I would need to see if there's a website. So in Imagine Canada, if there was a website, there'd be a link here. So going over to the gift analysis for Imagine Canada, it's really cool. You can actually sort by focus, right? So I can sort by arts and culture because I know they also give to health and social services and everything, but I'm really looking for their arts and culture gift. And then I also sort by highest gifts first. I want to see kind of what they give. And what's really great about foundations listed in Canada and in the States is this is actual money out the door. This isn't a gift range. This isn't a recognition range. This is an annual gift out the door. So they give to Stratford, they give to the Night Swing Repertory Theatre. There's others as well. And I'm looking for a 25,000 plus gifts. So I'm thinking, okay, these guys have given some nice gifts to theatre in the last couple of years. So I go over to the CRA, which is free. And sure enough, they do have a 2023 return. It's like, okay, so, and I take a look and they've updated their address. Okay, so I'm going to update that address there. I go to Charity Can. Oh, they have a phone number there. This is like, this is just getting even better. I can keep asking for that. They have a CEO, which I need to know. And they also have 2 connections to the charity that I'm working for, which I can put in as a default. So we're getting more and more information that I need, right? But we aren't done. It's like, who are these people? It's like, yes, we're getting this contact information. We're getting some really good gifts. We know that we've got the prospect, but we do need to do some more digging. So we can do a Google or a ProQuest news search. We almost had a Google News blackout here in Canada. We have a new bill called the Online News Act, but it was like beginning of December, the Canadian government made a deal with Google and said, please don't do that. And Google will pay the news companies $100 million annually. But it's good to have another searchable news source. So look at the library. ProQuest, I get through the library at free. So what have they given to this year? Look at gift announcements because they tell the why they've given to the library, why they've given to the theater. Who are the main individuals? As it turns out, North Pine does have a website that wasn't listed on CRA, Charity Can, Imagine Canada. It's so new, it's not listed anywhere, but it came out in one of the gift announcements. So find out who the main contacts are. Ooh, they have a CEO. That's great. The founders are John and Kathy Phillips, and John is a retired angel investor, including Shopify. So you're like, ooh, where did he get his money? Now I know where that is, right? And there's 2 linkages between the foundation and the charity. This is just a question that I'm going to throw out there. So we found this great little foundation. Should this go into your prospect list as a foundation and or as an individual prospects, right? A lot of it has to do with linkages. So if say, for instance, Kathy Phillips has a link to one of your board members, maybe we should talk to them about talking to Kathy. Or maybe it should go in as a foundation. One of the things you have to do, though, is make sure you link it. So you don't have someone who's working on foundation major gifts asking them, and then someone who's working on individual gifts asking them. Make sure they're affiliated. Final thoughts. I'm doing not too bad. I'm just a little, yeah. So we do deserve targeted, relevant information for our solicitors. We want to make sure that we're giving the right prospects for the right programs at the right amount and the right time. We want to make sure there's no mission drift. So that's why searching by kind of affinity program areas is great. Manage the database, make sure everything goes in the database. And then sometimes our worth is steering people away from those prospects who don't have capacity or affinity to give to your organization. Okay, now I can breathe. I'm going to stop share for a second. Was that a lot?
That was amazing, Tracey. Thank you. So we got a lot of questions here, but I think it's for a couple. So the first one I see here, much of our prospecting is process oriented. what is the impact of the role of AI in fundraising now and near in the future?
Well, it's kind of interesting. So Charity Can has actually kind of got this beta AI piece, right? Sort of like that sort of, they've kind of put this paragraph in now, hey, do a little AI. The problem with AI and prospect research is it's too general, right now. So right now, the AI isn't that threatening, I don't think I want to say, to prospect research. And even we've kind of already had AI a little bit in prospect research. And as far as like analytics and everything that we have, again, when we get results back from analytics, like, hey, here's 50 major donors you might want to look at, we have to vet them because it might be my neighbor who I know has 3 students living in the basement, that sort of thing. So you have to still kind of, we haven't lost our jobs yet to AI, let's put it.
Amazing. So we have a few more questions here. Let me actually pull this one up here. Sorry. At what point in a relationship building is it appropriate to make an ask? What cues should fundraisers look for?
Well, you need to actually, as I said, if you've got a foundation, it's kind of like fairly straightforward. But again, you are looking for those kind of door openers, these connections. So try to find a senior volunteer, whatever, if you can do that first. And maybe they can actually kind of open the door, right? And I mean, you can still fill in the online form if there is one, but at the same time, it's good to sort of have the connection to sort of like, hey, I filled in your online form, but I have some really good questions for you about a program that might interest you, right? So I think one of the really good expressions out of one of my fundraisers friends is, we always think we need more information before we have an ask. And so she always says, most fundraisers are ready, aim, 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 aim. They don't ask, right? Sort of thing. So it's like, if you're afraid to ask, maybe you shouldn't be a fundraiser. It sounds harsh, but it's at the same time, it's kind of like, that's the job, right? And passion plays a big part. I'm passionate about research, but I know one fundraiser I have who she's lost both her parents to cancer. If she's in front of a donor, she will get a gift to cancer. There's no way that she's leaving that without some sort of gift to cancer. So passion's big. There's 80,000 charities in Canada. If you can't find one you're passionate about, you need to change or something like that. So yeah.
I think this is gonna be our last question here.
You guys can email me them too. Sorry, I go on.
Oh no, it's an amazing presentation. What if you're a one-woman band? What is the best way to get the best bang for your buck when prospecting and doing research?
Well, it depends if you have any. I do recommend getting some of these subscription resources if you have them in your budget. And you do have to actually I review them each year, sort of like how much I use them and all that type of stuff, because it does save time. Before, when I first started this, there were no gifts to other organizations or anything like that, right? So again, it's just kind of a little bit at a time. Just remember, if you're one person shop, then you probably don't have many fundraisers either. Give them only what they can look at in the next 3 months. You don't need to set up the whole pipeline right away. It's all about staging. Don't do full profiles on the get-go. If someone just got a name, say, hey, I'm going to give a little bit of research now. I do a whole thing on research staging, but give you a little bit of research now. If you get a meeting, we'll do some more, right? Sort of thing. So, yeah.
Perfect. Amazing. And I think that's the end of our time, but
Sorry.
I usually like to leave with this question here. What is one thing you would want people to take from this webinar today?
Well, enjoy what you do. I mean, researchers are vital to fundraising. There's a lot of fundraisers I know that won't go and ask gift without research. And there are, APRA is a really great resource for everyone. So yeah, that's right. Join APRA and for sure you'll get sort of more networking that way. So yeah, yeah. Oh,
Well,
there's more raised hands. Sorry.
yes.
I can wait a few more minutes. I mean, if you want to extend it to 5 minutes, I'm happy to do that. So
Got a lot
yeah.
of claps going on, but if you would like to stay on for a few minutes, I can answer a couple more questions
Sure.
here.
Yeah, I'm happy with that.
Perfect. Okay, so if the executive director is also the development officer, what would you suggest would be the biggest bang for your buck, pun intended again?
What do you mean? Like, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, I think the thing is, so quite often is if they're a development officer and they actually make asks, right? That's good, and that they'll be supported sort of on the back end by the group. There's sometimes executive directors or presidents get assigned prospects just kind of for, it's almost kind of just, it's not, they don't really make asks. You have to just make sure that they make asks, which is great. And I mean, let's face it, if somebody comes, my sort of priority for research is whoever gets a meeting, has a meeting, gets research first, right? Or whoever's signing your paycheck. I'm just saying, if your executive director asks you for information on somebody, you probably should give it to them. But if someone comes along, they said, I booked a meeting on Friday, can you do something for me? He's like, yeah, that's right. Meetings are the priority. Yeah.
I guess it's kind of going off of this, but like, how do I involve my board in identifying prospects?
Oh, well, that's okay. It's just called a peer review. The problem is don't give them big lists, right? Sort of thing. So the peer review process should be a little bit at a time. So each time they meet, you can discuss, you can bring forward maybe 5 prospects that you've done research on already, right? Not just names. And then you can maybe ask them for 5 prospects. And Ken Wyman used to have this way, sort of like, hey, everyone, give me a name of a developer that you know. Right? Give me a name of a physician that you know. You can kind of break it down and help them. You know, that sort of idea. So the thing is that what they hate is these big lists, like, you know, just here's our prospect list. Tell me who you like. It'll never work. It'll never work. So, anyway, but there's only 12 people left. Oh no, there's only 12 questions left. Sorry. But,
Oh,
yeah.
there's a lot of
Yeah.
so let's see here. Here we go. So what materials or content do you need to prepare or provide the most when approaching prospects with your story? We are a small organization and don't have dedicated fundraising or marketing teams, so we want to prioritize creating the most effective and engaging content.
Well, I think it's kind of why do you exist and why are you unique, right? Sort of thing. Because if you can't provide sort of unique services in your area, that they're going to ask you, why do you exist and why haven't you combined with XYZ organization, right? So you should be able to do that, like, you know, the whole elevator speech sort of thing. You should be able to sort of say why you're making an impact in that particular community and where nobody else is. That's the thing, right? Sort of, and then why would you have gone to them if you didn't want to make an impact? So it's kind of interesting. It's like, I think the big question is to make sure how you differentiate yourself from other, what seems like organizations, like, you know, all the dream organizations in Canada, like, you know, Sunshine and Make-A-Wish and all that type of stuff. They have to distinguish themselves very clearly from the other ones in order to get gifts.
I think this was actually going to be our probably last question
Yeah.
right now.
Okay, Stephanie.
Yeah. So getting so how do you get funders to commit to an introductory call?
Oh, well, sort of what we were just talking
Yeah,
there,
exactly,
sort of thing. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, that's right. Yeah. But
Perfect.
as I said, you have to know the case. It has to be a good match. And hopefully there's somebody that, you know, you can link in there too as well. So
Perfect. Okay, everyone. Well, that concludes our session today. Thank you so much,
yeah.
Tracey, and
Yeah,
everyone.
let me know who wins the book.
Yes, I'll get everyone. I will let Tracey know who wins. Before we go, I just want everyone know that we have a very short survey that'll pop up right after the session. It only takes about 20 seconds, so we greatly appreciate hearing your feedback. We also have our next webinar on March 12th called How to Create a Simple and Effective Nonprofit Content Calendar. So I hope you'll check that out in the link that Chelsea's going to put there. So that's everyone. Thank you for attending and thank you, Tracey.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.